Ever wonder how retailers like Target or Temu seem to know exactly what you'll buy before you even know so? They're using data collected quietly from every click, scroll, and purchase to trigger impulse buys at scale. I worked with over 100 companies, helping them run similar campaigns using these predictive data models. In this video, I'll show you how these algorithms actually work, what data is being used, and how you can run a similar project at your company, no matter the size of it or your tech stack. Because the person who brings this kind of insights into your team, well, that's how you get promoted. Let's jump right in. You may have heard the story of how Target knew a teen girl was pregnant before her parents knew, which became a huge hit back in 2012. But the story is not quite what it seems. It became a really popular story on how algorithms are becoming so good at identifying what we do as humans or predicting what we're gonna do. But some skepticism is warranted here. Actually, an author called Colin Fraser had this great Medium article trying to debunk some of the elements of the story. This is back in 2020, this is 5 years ago, so obviously some of the machine learning and AI has improved since then. Nonetheless, it is helpful to know that elements of the story are likely made up. You know, how like the father came to the store and talked to an employee and stuff like that. But how the algorithm knew or perhaps had a sense of how someone was pregnant may also be a little stretch, but there's a grain of truth in there. Now, what is true is that retailers do have some predictive ability of what a user will do next, but typically in a probability context. That is, there's a probability of 80% that you might buy diapers in the next 30 days. You may not buy diapers, and the probability may be higher or lower. So based on that, you kind of gauge some ideas on what campaigns might be helpful for this specific user. Now, we see recommendations like this all the time. Spotify tries to recommend a song you might like. Netflix tries to recommend a TV show you may enjoy. Temu and retailers like Target are trying to recommend what products to buy. And again, some of these algorithms sometimes work well, sometimes they don't. We kind of tend to dismiss the ones that don't. We don't remember too much those, but we do remember like, oh yeah, I remember I really wanted to buy white shoes, and then Target showed me an ad with white shoes. So those kind of tend to stand out. But as Colin mentions in his article, if we talk about algorithms in more technical terms, we also have to talk about the accuracy, how accurate an algorithm is. Is it accurate 1 out of 10 times or 5 out of 10 times? What is the reliability? How well does it apply to different use cases and so forth? So algorithms can work very well in some situations, not in others, but we tend to have a bit of a bias to dismiss the ones that didn't quite work. Now, before we can talk about what makes an algorithm accurate in terms of making you buy those white shoes, we need to first understand what it feeds the algorithm. As you can imagine, data is a huge component of this. It's really what powers an algorithm. So the more data you have, the more accurate data you have, the better it is. Now, when we talk about data, we're talking about very specific data points. For example, if we're looking at retailers, we'd be looking at shopping behavior. So what products you saw on the website, what things you added to cart, what things were in your cart when you started checkout, maybe when you abandoned the checkout, what was left in the cart, what interactions you have had with email campaigns, social media posts, SMS, any other kind of marketing campaigns, what demographics they may have about you as a user, whether your gender, your age, your potential income level, your education level, and it may have some psychographic data from any surveys you have filled out in the past. So all of this kind of gets combined together into a single data model that tells, hey, this is John Smith. He is between 25 and 34 years old. He has a high income job. He tends to buy a lot of Nerf guns, and he tends to read a bunch of emails. So this is all being sort of collected in the background. This is sort of the magic. It's actually really the hard part of this algorithm world. How you collect all this data in a way that is accurate, in a way that makes sense, and if you're a large retailer, in a way that you can do it at scale. You can imagine someone like Target has a lot of data out there, even more than what I mentioned. But if you're not able to collect it and activate it, so to speak, to turn into some kind of actionable insights, you're just stuck with basically random computer storage. Quick side note, if you're looking for help on collecting the right data to actually make a lot of this data stack work for you, get in touch. I help companies build awesome data stacks that make building this kind of algorithms a breeze. Let's continue on with the rest of the video. And once you have the necessary data, how do you actually turn it into sales? That's kind of our end goal here, right? Now, this part is actually easier than the data collection. I know it may be surprising, but collecting data is actually quite hard. When it comes to actually taking the data and turning it into some kind of prediction, and we'll see what that means in a second, there's actually lots of tools that can do that. So this is AWS. They have a tool called SageMaker Canvas that allows you to kind of build this machine learning predictions. You kind of just feed it the data, and it'll do the math or really the statistics for you behind the scenes. We then have CDPs or customer data platforms like RudderStack. There's one option where they again have a way to do machine learning for you. You have all your data connected to the customer data platform through data warehouses like a BigQuery, Snowflake, and other sources. And then from there, you can write some code, a very simple code that would then get taken to the machine learning model. And they're likely using something like AWS in the background or something that's kind of similar. And then we have another CDP, Segment.com, which again, you can see they have a very kind of simple interface here where you can start to make these predictions based on all the data that is connected and runs through the customer data platform. Now, this is just two examples. There's likely 10, 20, 30 other vendors out there similar to Segment or RudderStack, or of course, similar to what AWS is offering. The point I'm trying to make here is when it comes to the models themselves that can make these predictions, there's actually lots of vendors out there that can do this for you. As long as you have the data in a format that's accessible, you can plug and play a lot of this model. So you don't really have to dive too much into how the models work, though we're gonna look at that in a second. You can do this even if you don't have a lot of machine learning or AI expertise in your company. And of course, if you do have the expertise, like someone like Target likely does, then of course you can run even more complex and more advanced models. But there's a lot of ways you can start with easier sort of plug and play models out there. Now, at a simple level, to understand how a model works, let's take an example. Let's imagine that we're focused on diapers, which is kind of relevant to the Target story. A model will look at all the data of people who have purchased diapers over the last, let's say, 30 days, and it'll take all the users. Let's say there's 1,000 users who have bought diapers in the last 30 days, and it'll look at all the other data points that those 1,000 users have taken. So perhaps they also bought baby rags, maybe they bought baby formula, maybe they bought beer, maybe they bought chips, maybe they opened certain kind of emails, maybe they saw some kind of social media posts. It's all being captured or counted for those 1,000 users who bought diapers. And then from there, other users who haven't bought diapers get compared against those patterns. So let's say myself, I haven't bought diapers in the last 30 days. The model can then say, okay, here's Ruben, and here's the actions that he has taken recently. Maybe I opened a couple emails that were similar to those 1,000 people. Maybe I also bought beer, and I also bought chips, and maybe I also saw some social media posts, whatever it may be. So based on how my actions compare to the model of those 1,000 people, it can then give me a predictive score. It can say, you know what, based on everything Ruben has done, we predict that over the next 30 days, there is a 60% chance that Ruben may buy diapers. Remember, this is probabilities. So it's kind of based on the data, based on what I've done. And then from there, it doesn't say he will buy diapers or he won't buy diapers. It just simply says 60% chance he might. That 60%, that probability, we can call it sort of the predictive user trait. That's what then gets synced to different email tools out there or any kind of marketing tools, really, like your CRM, email marketing platforms. So let's say you have like a MailChimp, somebody to send emails. Now, my profile has a value of 60%. And then from there, a retailer can then say, hey, I want to send this email that's going to have a promotion offer for diapers. I'm only going to send it to any user that has a 60% chance of buying diapers in the next 30 days or higher. So then I would get that email. And again, I may choose to take that action or I may not, right? It's probabilities. They, of course, may be much tighter. They may say, hey, no, we want to send this diaper promotion, but only to people who have a 90% chance or higher of buying diapers in the next 30 days. And then that becomes sort of a smaller cohort. So that's kind of what the model is basically looking at all the data and trying to output some kind of probability, typically as a user trait for maybe something specific. It could be as specific as buying diapers. Perhaps it's even broader, like, buying like baby products as a category, or maybe just purchasing anything, right? It could be very, very broad. Like, what is the probability I may buy something from Target in the next 30 days? You think of like your Amazon purchases, for example, it's kind of the same logic. Like if you were to say, hey, what's the probability you may buy something from Amazon in the next 30 days? It could be quite high if you consistently buy 2, 3, 4, 5 products per month. And if you start going down in categories like what about computer products? What about books? What about apparel? Then that probability might vary a lot depending on your purchase behavior. Now, creating the predictive user traits, as you saw, it's actually quite straightforward once you have the data. You take one of those plug and play models from lots of vendors out there, you run it through your data, and it'll start to output this predictive user traits. And then you can, of course, sync those to your CRM, your email marketing tool, maybe sync them to your ad platform campaigns like Facebook ads or Google ads, and then start to run actual marketing activations based on that data. Now, before you create your own predictive user traits, you need to make sure you have the right plan for it. We've seen some of those elements, but I want to ensure you're following the right steps. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your time and effort. So here's a step-by-step plan. If you are in product or you're marketing and you kind of want to start to play around with this predictive user traits and see if they actually help your marketing efforts be more targeted and more personalized. So step one, as we mentioned, this is where you really want to put in the bulk of your effort. You have to collect the right data. So you have to work with your technical team, collect all the different data points, whether it's the data you own, like the first-party data as it's called, maybe other data sources like ad platforms, social media, your email messages, your CRM, and bring it all to some kind of central place, most likely a data warehouse, again, like a BigQuery or like a Redshift or like a Snowflake. Again, you can work the technical details with your team. You may want to use one of the vendors that we saw, like a category of vendors, like a customer data platform. We saw a couple today, like Rudderstack, Segment, but again, there's lots of them, and Particle, reverse ETL providers like a Hightouch or Census. You can look for sort of this predictive machine learning user traits, and you'll see 10, 20 vendors, which again, might just make the process a little easier. Number two, you have to then run or outsource the model. So this may depend on whatever you do in step one. So if you go with, say, like a data warehouse in step one, like a BigQuery, then you want to find some kind of vendor that integrates with that data warehouse. If you go with a customer data platform in step one, then you're actually already going to have the ability to run those predictive models because the customer data platform is likely going to have that logic already built in. So step two kind of depends, but again, you can sort of outsource this to get started pretty quickly as long as you have the right data in a centralized location. And if your team has more advanced resources, especially around machine learning and AI, you may go to something completely custom, maybe some kind of open source model out there, maybe even build your own model that may be more targeted to your needs. And number three, then you create the traits. You let the model run and you start to create some of those traits. And you start to figure out what are the most important traits. Again, you may go from broad to specific. Maybe you just want to look at users that may have a high LTV, lifetime value, or perhaps users who have a high probability of churning, cancel subscriptions, or of course, users who may have a high probability of making a purchase or under a specific category. You kind of get to decide. Once you have all the data and you have enough of it, you can kind of build lots of different traits and then sync them to, of course, your different marketing platforms like a Salesforce, MailChimp, Braze, or whatever you use to communicate with customers. And remember, the bonus here is you don't really have to be highly technical to understand this. You can just get the pieces together, maybe get some technical help, but especially on the model itself, which tends to be the most technically complex element, you can let the vendor do the heavy lifting for you. It will function a bit like a black box, but then you get to see what it actually looks like in practice when you start doing communication campaigns against those user traits. Now, big brands like Target and Temu, of course, have huge amounts of data. They have high level of technical resources, and they're able to take all those and use them across this wide range of campaigns that they run on all kind of platforms. So it can be very powerful. But you can take a scaled down version and use it in your own way to have an impact on your marketing and growth. Now, if you're not sure how to sell this internally, then I highly recommend you check out my next video where I share some simple strategies for how to turn data into persuasive stories. So you may actually just have to build a great slide deck, a great presentation to show the other people in your team and, of course, decision makers why taking this approach with predictive user traits can be a fantastic way to level up your marketing. And that comes down less to the data itself, but more to how you pitch it into a story. So check out that video that'll appear here on the screen. My name is Ruben, and I'll see you in the next video.